Wyoming voters, one way or the other, will have an opportunity to have their voice heard on the question of whether medical marijuana will be legalized in the state of Wyoming. Welcome to Wyoming Perspectives. I'm Craig Blumenshine from Wyoming PBS. Wyoming is one of the states which allows residents to bypass its legislature by going through the initiative or referendum process. It's a difficult process in Wyoming to bring an initiative, but the backers of medical marijuana are trying, and that is what we'll talk about tonight. Before we introduce our panel, I want to encourage our viewers to submit us your questions about the future impact of marijuana in Wyoming. You can do that by calling 1-800-495-9788, by emailing us to pod@wyomingpbs.org, or via Twitter using hashtag WYPOT. We visited with Governor Matt Mead in August regarding his decision to create a council to gauge the effects of marijuana usage in the state ahead of the petition drive for the initiative that could put the issue before Wyoming voters in 2016.
Whether you're a proponent of legalization in any form or not, or you're like me and against it, this decision is upon us. We see what Colorado's doing. We know we're being impacted by Colorado. We see the initiative, the ballot initiative going forward, and the signatures that will be required there. And so this is the time to act. And it's not only in terms of just the medical side of it or how it affects the individual, but just in terms of businesses. There is a host of questions that I think need to be answered. And so I compiled the group. Obviously you see that there is a number of state agency folks on there, and partly because it's for the public, it's a volunteer. For the agencies, it's a voluntold, because I need some expertise from the Department of Health, the Department of Revenue on there. But I also, as you noted, I've asked Representative Byrd to be on there, who has a different viewpoint than mine on where we should be with regard to marijuana laws, and I think his viewpoint certainly is going to be important in that process. My expectation isn't that the task force come out and say, legalize, don't legalize, but more in terms of, here's the information we've gathered, here's the information we need, where do we go next to compile that data?
We're in the campus of the Little Theater at Central Wyoming College in Riverton, and joining me to discuss your questions are Chris Christian. She's the director of Wyoming NORML. Chris, welcome to Wyoming Perspectives. Dr. David Wheeler is a neurologist at Casper Neurologic Associates. Dr. Wheeler, welcome. Thank you. Representative Dave Miller is chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Representative Miller, welcome.
Thanks, Craig.
And Shane Johnson is the sheriff of Lincoln County and also the president of the Wyoming Chiefs of Police and Sheriff's Association. Sheriff, welcome.
Thank you.
Chris, I'd like to visit with you first. You're the director of NORML, which is the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. Why are you bringing this issue forward in the way you're bringing it forward, through a ballot initiative? And I'm also curious, you have 25,000 or more signatures to get. Do you think you'll meet that goal of having that before February 8th of 2016 here in Wyoming?
Well, let me answer the second part of your question first. Yes, we do think that we will make the goal of 50,000 signatures. We won't make it by Halloween, but we will make it before February 8th. And that's one of the reasons why I am doing this. 3 years ago, I went to 420 in Denver, and I saw the tremendous outpouring of people that were for legalization in Colorado. It had been legalized there, but it wasn't legal yet. And when I came back home from that and talked with friends about it, it caught on. I was talking with Facebook friends about, we went to Denver, we had a great time, and I started studying and learning about the laws in Wyoming and how this had to be done. In the meantime, a proposal came before the legislature that was immediately shuttled away. Sue Wallace passed away. She was one of the people that we were hoping would introduce the bill for us. We've been writing and sending letters and writing letters to the editors in the paper and calling our senators and representatives for the last 3 years, asking them to introduce something about cannabis, to decriminalize it, to make it so that our young people were no longer put in jail over a plant, so that we weren't ruining college futures, so that we weren't ruining people's reputations to get mortgages on their houses. And more of my attention went to how to construct this law, how it could be passed here. And when we discovered that we could do a ballot initiative, we naively sat down and tried to write one. And we found out that not just anyone can write a law. It's been a struggle over a 3-year period of time to get it into the form that it is now, a bill that was acceptable to the Secretary of State, that met all the standards and included all of the things in it that the people in our group had talked about having included in the law for the past time.
Just for the record, Chris, a lot of the things you discussed really had to do with recreational marijuana use, but that's really not what your ballot initiative is about, correct?
Well, initially, everyone wanted recreational in this group. But as we gathered information and talked to people, and we did our own polling, and we looked at the UW poll, we talked to Bob Hoban in Denver, who is the attorney that wrote the legislation, and based on that information, it was a decision to leave the recreational out of this bill, to go ahead and get the medical marijuana and the hemp to support it passed in Wyoming, and then we'll see what happens with it.
And we'll talk more about that in a little bit later. Chris, I want to turn to Representative Miller. And I'm curious, Representative, are you satisfied with Governor Mead's approach to create the council that he's created, and what are you expecting as a legislator as an outcome from the information, or what information do you want to see?
I think it was a good idea for him to create that council, develop more information for all of the folks in Wyoming, especially the legislature, because we're the ones that can make the law if there's enough support. And there have been efforts to bring bills like this, but there's just been a lack of support. This initiative process, I think, is a good thing for the people in Wyoming. I think Chris has a good approach to try to look at the medical marijuana first. If you can't get that through, then of course the recreational is not going to go anywhere. And as you know, we did pass a hemp oil bill this last session. And that's a step in that direction. And at this point, I'm not ready to want to go any further than that, especially with the experiment going on south of our border.
And you are a co-sponsor of that bill, Representative Miller, is that
correct?
Dr. Wheeler, you already have some experience with that bill that was passed by the legislature. What is that experience?
Sure. So just to fill in a little bit of the background, we several of us worked with the legislature to identify the best method to bring forward this kind of extreme rescue treatment, maybe you think of it for people with severe epilepsy. So there was this amazing report on CNN by Sanjay Gupta about Charlotte's Web, a very specific type of oil created from marijuana plants with very low concentrations of THC, the stuff that gets you high, and higher levels of a different compound called CBD. And the thought is that CBD may be helpful in preventing or treating some types of epilepsy. And there are some really startling and amazing stories of young kids with devastating epilepsies who, after ingesting these oils, have had dramatic improvements. This is not the same as clinical research, so I don't think it's fair to refer to Charlotte's Web or hemp oil as medicines or pharmaceuticals, but they are clearly herbal remedies that show tremendous promise. And as a physician who takes care of people with devastating epilepsies, I felt like it would be a good idea to enhance access to this, particularly because we were able to do it in collaboration with our legislature in a very controlled manner. We have very specific details about who's eligible, how they become eligible, and how we're going to track their response to this treatment.
Again, I want to encourage our viewers to give us a call at 800-495-9788 to give us their questions. We have operators ready. Sheriff Johnson, what is the position of the Sheriffs and Chief of Police Association about this ballot initiative?
Well, we feel like that there's a lot of education that needs to be done about marijuana in general, but also this initiative raises some real concerns with the chiefs and sheriffs. And me personally, there's a lot of parts of the initiative that are a concern to law enforcement. And my personal belief is that there's a lot of the community that's ambivalent to the point where if they feel like it's going to help somebody, who are they to stand in the way? Yet at the same time, they don't have enough knowledge at this point to know specific concerns about what the societal changes will be if we go this route. So there's a lot of concerns with the initiative. There's a lot of concerns with with marijuana in general, but I think it's clear that what this ballot initiative is an end around to get recreational marijuana.
We've had a question, and it's something that I think others have expressed an interest in. Do you feel it's appropriate for someone in your position to comment on a ballot initiative?
Well, I think that the role of law enforcement is to educate. That's one of our roles. Education, along with enforcement, is a proper role of law enforcement. So absolutely, we should be able to share our concerns about any type of initiative or laws that are coming around. Where our lobby as a chiefs and sheriff is to educate. My position as a sheriff, absolutely, I should be commenting and educating about what the initiative says.
Question for Dr. Wheeler. Dr. Wheeler, generally, what types of pain does marijuana best treat? Do we know? What does science say? And what are the health benefits of medical marijuana, generally and specifically?
The easy answer is that we don't know very much, and the reason for this is that the federal government has never acknowledged that there's any potential clinical benefit to marijuana products, and so for that reason it's been very difficult for researchers and clinicians to access marijuana products to study in a detailed manner. Nevertheless, there have been a few studies published that are of reasonably good value, and so we have some not particularly high-level evidence, but we have some indications that marijuana in various forms may be helpful for treating pain associated with multiple sclerosis. There's ample evidence that it's useful in treating both nausea and anorexia, loss of appetite associated with both cancer treatment as well as HIV disease, AIDS. Once you get beyond those fairly narrowly defined situations, there's almost no good clinical data to help us determine whether there may be benefit to marijuana products. Not only is it difficult to access these products, but most of the studies that have been published haven't used well-defined products in terms of what is medical marijuana. It isn't a monolithic product. It doesn't have a standard amount of any given chemical. It comes in many different forms. It's ingested in many different ways, and those are important characteristics that make medical marijuana not medicine. So I have a problem with the fundamental premise here that we're talking about using marijuana as a medicinal plant is different from calling it a medicine. So there's many thousands of years of tradition of herbalists and naturopaths and other types of healers using plant-based materials to help people feel better. But this is very different from the practice of clinical medicine, which is founded upon very strict scientific principles which have not been adhered to in terms of how we talk about using marijuana as a medicine.
Doctor, if this law had passed or does pass, do you believe that you would have already prescribed medical marijuana to some of your patients? Probably for some of the conditions that I mentioned where there's pretty good evidence, clinical evidence that it's beneficial. But I almost want to take issue with the idea that I would prescribe marijuana to anybody, because the word prescription implies giving somebody an order for a medication, and that's not what this is about. This is about making a recommendation to a patient for a lifestyle choice that may help them feel better, which I'm comfortable doing. I do that in all sorts of different ways. I talk to people about sleeping better and managing stress and all sorts of things that aren't just medicine. So it's not that it's outside the purview of a physician, but I fundamentally disagree with the idea that you can refer to marijuana products as they exist today as medicines, and therefore the real answer is no, I would not prescribe it, but I may help or encourage people to access it in certain ways under certain circumstances. Chris, there are two components about this legislation this initiative that I'd like to ask you about. First is, this will be dispensed at dispensaries, not by a pharmacist. Why? The second question is local control is removed from this. Cities, towns, or counties would not have an option, as I read your initiative, to determine whether in their community a dispensary can exist.
You always ask me these dual questions, and I don't know which to answer first.
Let's take the pharmacy versus dispensary first.
Well, actually, to most of us, it doesn't matter to us whether we have to go to a pharmacy or a dispensary. The dispensary idea is one that came from Oregon and Washington and California and Colorado. our intention was to make it easy to copy what others have done before us. This is not rocket science. It's not inventing a wheel. There's plenty of models out there that they can use and follow to develop their program here. So we made it easy for them by leaving a door open for them to do what they'd like to do with the bill. Now give me the second question.
Second question, before we move forward, just curious, Dr. Wheeler, do you have an opinion about whether and how medical marijuana should be dispensed?
I guess I haven't thought about this yet, so I'm struggling with the answer a little bit. I think that if as a community we're going to start enhancing access to agents that we're intending to treat medical conditions with. So if we're really going to treat this as medication, then it's important then that access to it be strictly controlled. And so the bill, as I read it, has a fairly lengthy list of wide variety of medical conditions. I would love to see that tightened up to really just address those where there's genuine clinical and scientific data for benefit. And if that were to happen, then it would make sense then to start talking about what types of marijuana, in what forms, and in what concentrations. And it would be much easier to regulate that if the medicinal were being distributed in a very regulated manner. So dispensary may be fine if they're tightly regulated.
Okay. The second part of the question, Chris, was local control. A city or a community or a county, as this bill is written, could not say, we prefer not to have a dispensary in our community.
Again, we watched this argument go in Colorado, and all of us that want to see this passed and passed in our county with the great distances that we have involved in travel in Wyoming, that no county should be able to say that you can't buy it here, because there are people there, and I'm going to cover some of the information given here. I disagree that there has not been enough research done. The research that has been done hasn't been done by the FDA, and it hasn't been done by the pharmaceutical associations, and it hasn't been done by doctors on American soil. It's been done in Europe and in Australia, and particularly in Portugal. I dispute the contention that there's not enough research. This is the most researched plant in history. We do know what its medicinal qualities are. Now, clinical trials and studies haven't been done in this country because it's illegal here. We have a circular argument going on in our Congress of the United States between the Federal Drug Administration, the DEA, the 49 cop associations that are behind that they don't want the research done, but it has been done elsewhere, and it has been shown to reduce tumors in cancerous skin cells. It has been football players with concussions have been treated with it. It has been shown to heal neurons. There's plenty of research out there if people will go and dig and look for it, and Wyoming NORML's job is to get it out there.
Thank you very much. Representative Miller, I want to come back to the local question. What are your thoughts on this bill where local control is not part of the issue? Does that concern you?
It does, because I'm one that wants to move all the rulemaking as low as possible, as close to the people as possible on any issue. And I'm kind of, since I'm really not supporting the recreational marijuana or medicinal marijuana at this point, it kind of goes against my general pushback against a lot of things federal government controlled. And again, I would have to fault the federal government for at least not allowing some sort of research in the U.S. on this particular product. I wish they would, so we could answer some of these questions, make it more well known what it can and what it's good for and what it can't do. And right now, again, that's one of the reasons the governor appointed that commission. But again, I don't think we should be passing laws that go against federal law at this point, which passing this would at this point.
Sheriff Johnson, do you have any comments about the local control issue?
Well, it's a big issue, yeah. I mean, I think the people in the communities should decide what their standards are and be able to have a say in that. That's why we have local election and local elected officials to represent the community. And I would just say as well that there is studies going on throughout the country, and there's even a medication that has been approved by the FDA that's based on the compounds in marijuana that can be prescribed right now. And so I think that there's a lot of research still to be done, but the reality is there is research going on, and to the point even that there's an approved medication that you can be prescribed that's based on the compounds of marijuana.
I want to encourage our callers again to give us a call at 1-800-495-9788, to email us at pot@wyoming.com, or to tweet us at WYPOT. As we continue on, each of you, I'll ask this question of, what have we learned from the Colorado experience? We could talk all day, perhaps, but succinctly, what has Colorado taught us to date? Chris, I'll start with you.
They legalized recreational marijuana and the sky did not fall.
Okay. Dr. Wheeler?
It has dramatically increased the number of questions I get about the medical properties of marijuana and forced us to take a good hard look at what the pros and cons might be.
Representative Miller?
What I'm hearing is not producing the tax revenue that they thought it would. Another issue, of course, for Wyoming, with the University of Wyoming in Southeast Wyoming and within just a few miles of the border, we had a student, I believe the student was actually from Northwest Community College, that died last year, I believe it was, from overdosing on the edible products that are being sold in Colorado. And I see that as a real problem. It's affecting Wyoming, so it's just not Colorado.
Sheriff?
Well, we've learned a lot, actually, and we're lucky because there's an experiment going on right south of us, so we can learn from that. But what we do know is there's increased instances of use by the youth in Colorado. There's increase in impaired driving because of marijuana, or an element of marijuana in DUIs, that's increased. The use overall by all age groups has increased. There's not the financial windfall. And when they do talk about the windfall, they forget to talk about the back end and what the costs are to implement all the regulations and licensings for marijuana and the societal costs. So there's a lot we're learning from it, most of it not good.
Can the panel answer this question? Can we all agree that marijuana can be used responsibly? What would your answer be to that question?
Absolutely, and I'd like to continue to, I have some information that's more relevant here. The statistics out of Colorado show that using marijuana for youth has dropped in the last year. We're not going to use statistics from 5 years ago here. We're going to use what's happening now in Colorado. Fewer kids are using it. The drug education programs in the Colorado schools are very effective. Not only has drunk driving gone down in Colorado since they legalized cannabis, but overdose deaths have gone down from prescription drugs in Colorado since they legalized cannabis. Now, do we have more people using it? I expect we do. More people will avail themselves of it here too when it's readily available. Does this actually constitute a hazard? Based on faulty science, you can come up with any numbers that you want to, but the statistics show that people who use cannabis and drive are no more dangerous out there than ordinary people on prescription medications.
Okay.
And far less dangerous than people who use alcohol.
And I do want to talk about the alcohol-marijuana comparison here in just a moment. But to continue on, do we agree that marijuana can be used responsibly? Is that something we should consider?
I think so.
Representative Miller?
In the same light as people consuming alcohol, absolutely.
Sheriff?
I would agree with that.
Let's talk about alcohol and marijuana. Is it useful to compare the two? Many people, I believe, might think that alcohol is more dangerous. Is that a useful train of thought? And anyone can answer. Dr. Wheeler.
Sure, I'd love to answer that. I think there's absolutely no question that alcohol is significantly more dangerous than marijuana. It is far more toxic to the body. The societal costs of alcohol are catastrophic. So I think that is a useful comparison when thinking about whether broadening the availability of marijuana. I think that's something that we need to be looking at. I also think there's a comparison you can draw regarding the potential for medicinal value. There are medicinal values to alcohol, and occasionally doctors recommend alcohol as a way to help manage symptoms. But just like I don't think marijuana is a drug yet, alcohol is not used as a drug. We don't prescribe alcohol to people. Likewise, I don't think doctors should be prescribing marijuana to people. It may be that we should be prescribing CBD oil in known concentrations and known ingestibles, and especially if we understand the potential risks and benefits to the patient that we're prescribing it to. It's an entirely different question from asking whether somebody should be able to use pot to feel better in the evening for whatever reason suits them.
Do others have opinions on whether alcohol and marijuana should be compared? Sure.
I think that those are very good arguments, and the fact that it may or may not be as dangerous is not exactly a ringing endorsement for marijuana. So, I mean, again, there's things that we should understand about the use, and one of them is that driving while using marijuana is dangerous. There's even people out there who say, I drive better when I use marijuana. Well, that's not a study, and there's people that say that same thing with alcohol. But it's dangerous, and normalization brings about more use. So we're going to have higher use across the board. And again, my information is not 5 years old. There was a recently released report from HIDA that shows that all those things that we talked about, the use by youth, suspensions in school, all those things are going up after the legalization.
Let me
Representative
run
Miller?
into that also. You know, it's been, I think, roughly 80 years since marijuana and its derivatives have been made illegal. And it's kind of like the whole prohibition thing. We've learned how to allow alcohol in some minimal capacity, and society accepts a glass of wine at dinner. Frankly, if you use the same amount in marijuana, you know, on a recreational use and didn't go past that limit, it probably has roughly the same effect. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but I don't see it as a lot different. You know, in overuse of anything, it's probably bad for you. Minimal use of a lot of things is probably helpful.
We've had a ton of questions, and I really thank our viewers for wanting to know more about this issue. It's certainly important. Question from a viewer from Worland, and anyone can answer this, but his experience is that people who use alcohol and have hangovers the next day are much more dangerous on the job than people that use marijuana and don't have hangovers the next day. Is there any science that is that an anecdotal story, or is that actually true? Is there some truth to it? Anyone want to comment about that?
Well, anecdotally, I would comment, yes, I would much rather deal with someone who's stoned than a drunk, and I was a bartender for a long time. There's a component with alcohol at which people become unreasonable, and you can ask this gentleman on the end, he knows what I mean. You can't talk to them anymore. That's rarely the case with someone who has used cannabis if they don't have another underlying condition involved in their use.
Anyone else want to comment about the ability to work after perhaps overusing either?
Sure, I think it's pretty clear that the effects of marijuana end pretty completely once it's out of your system. There really isn't such a thing as a marijuana hangover. If you smoke the night before, your faculties are probably the same the next morning as they were before you smoked. I don't know of any scientific studies on this, but my experience with people who drank heavily the night before is that they tend to be much slower in their thinking and they have slower reflexes. So I think that argument makes good sense.
This question combines a couple of questions that we've had from our viewers. It's going to be legal in this bill once someone has a marijuana certificate to grow their own marijuana plants at home. The question is that forever? And is that what this bill intends? And is that a concern?
Nothing is forever.
What would prevent, in this legislation, the question might be what would prevent someone who at one time was allowed to grow his or her own marijuana that perhaps didn't need the drug anymore medically, but continued to cultivate it for a long time?
Well, those things are all going to be discussed and involved in the regulations as developed by the Liquor Board. Now, we did, again, leave the legislation very open for the legislature and for the regulatory agencies to develop the rules for Wyoming particularly. We don't have to copy Colorado, we don't have to copy California, but we have those models out there to use. And yes, we left it deliberately broad, knowing that the legislature and anybody else who wants to mess with it can do it.
Some might argue, though, that's your end to making recreational marijuana available.
So what if it is? It will be here eventually anyway. I think that we need to prepare for it. I think that the federal government is going to act to make it legal everywhere before we have a chance to act on our bill. I don't know that there's any more to fear from recreational marijuana than there is from medicinal. From my point of view, all cannabis use is medicinal. It's a preventative medicine. I'd eat it whole, daily, in a salad to keep myself healthy. And there's no getting high from that.
We're more than halfway through our program. Does anyone want to comment about that? Representative Miller.
Craig, I think if the bill did pass for the medical marijuana, I think the people probably would receive a card, something like a driver's license, that's going to have an expiration date. And then after that date, they'd have to dispose of their plants. That's the way I would do it. Otherwise, law enforcement would have the right to prosecute them under our law.
Sheriff?
So what ends up happening is it's kind of an open-ended prescription. In Colorado, we see that those cards are good for a year. So even if you accept all the arguments about symptoms and pain, if that pain is gone in a month, you still have access to that marijuana for a full year until your card expires. And so, again, I would bring up that the medical bill is trying to go out there and make the compassionate argument that there's people that need it, and that's understandable. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say somebody that says I use this and it helped me. I'm not going to argue with that person. If it did, then it did. I'm not going to take the argument that it did not. However, if what this ballot initiative is the precursor, as it appears to be, to get recreational marijuana in Wyoming, then let's call it what it is, and drop the medical element of this, because the reality is this is a push to get marijuana legalized for recreational use and get it normalized in Wyoming.
Representative Miller, excuse me, let me continue on, and we'll have more opportunities to discuss later, but this question's for you, and it has to do with something Chris brought up earlier. University of Wyoming professor Jim King co-directed a survey last year that showed 72% of Wyoming residents support medical marijuana. Even when broken down amongst conservative and liberal lines, a majority in either party supported medical marijuana. That said, why hasn't the legislature then acted?
We've tried. Some people have tried. We did start, of course, with the bill that was passed last year on the oil derivative. Basically, we represent all corners of Wyoming, the legislature, the 90 of us. And, one way that people could go about it is approach, if it's a big issue, frankly, I'm trying to think if I've been approached by anyone in this community to consider legalizing marijuana. And I can't remember in my 15 years being approached one time.
You may be approached here in just a moment.
I'm afraid I'll hear a lot now.
To continue on, Dr. Wheeler, as a pain sufferer addicted to pain meds, truly might medical marijuana be a better alternative for some?
Maybe. I think at this point there are certain types of pain that we know that marijuana is helpful for, and I think it's worth exploring treatments in those directions. There are other types of pain where there's either no evidence or there is in fact evidence that it's not beneficial. So I think that if we're going to venture forth into the world of clinical medicine and using this as an agent to aid the treatment of patients, we need to be really careful about what we define as the disease. So it depends on what kind of pain you're talking about. But I'd like to, at this point, interject a fairly strongly held opinion that I have related to what this referendum is about. As a physician, I genuinely resent the use and co-optation of my profession to achieve a societal change. You're asking us as professionals to take on a huge responsibility for the treatment of our patients and kind of forcing down our throat a certain type of treatment that for which we don't think there's adequate evidence. And I know that you think that there are a lot of studies that contradict what I'm saying. I'm not ignorant of those studies, and neither are my colleagues. We've scoured the world for good evidence to try to help determine, because none of us want to withhold good treatment from our patients. If there were good evidence out there, we'd be all over it. It isn't there. There are a few decent studies that almost climb up to the level of what we call Class C evidence, meaning that it's more likely than not that it may be beneficial in those narrowly defined conditions that I've brought up. But I just think that this is a con job. I think there's probably a diversity of opinion on the stage about whether it should be people should be allowed to use marijuana recreationally. That's not the question that's in front of us. The question that's in front of us is, should we force doctors to prescribe this stuff as if it were a medication? And I say 100% no, that's the wrong way to go about this. And I hope that you're right, that the federal government beats us to the punch and legalizes it across the country, because I don't want to be part of this conversation. This is not about treating patients. This is about smoking pot to feel better. And if that's what you want to do, more power to you, but don't call it a medicine when it's not.
Mrs. Christian, I'll give you the opportunity to respond here.
There are a lot of people that think they should legislate other people's morality. I think we should stop doing that. The fact that this doctor doesn't want to prescribe medical marijuana to his patients doesn't preclude another doctor with a different degree coming into this state or already here in the state who has decided that it is a medicine based on the preponderance of the evidence before us. Now, I consider all the studies as you do, and I'm perfectly capable of taking apart a study and seeing the modality and whether they actually did the study that they pretended that they came up with. And for you to say that this is a fraud, that people don't want this as medication and shouldn't have it as medication because you don't consider it medication, breaks my heart. There are people out here by the thousands who do think it is medicine and want it prescribed to them.
Mrs. Christian, I'd like to move on, and I appreciate your comments. I do have a question. If people are interested in signing the petition, what should they do?
Well, we have it outside in the lobby.
And these
for
are
you
viewers
tonight.
across Wyoming.
And across Wyoming, we have people in every community with petitions, right down to Cody, Sheridan, Gillette, and the smaller communities too, like Douglas and Hartville.
And where in those
and
communities?
Pinedale. I have a list on our website of places that we have them. I haven't published phone numbers yet. I haven't had time to get the list together.
What is your website so people can look for more?
www.wyomingnormal.org.
And that's Wyoming NORML.
NORML, correct.
Okay, let's move on. Can the panel agree, is the question, that marijuana use can be addictive? If we agree that it can be addictive, not always, I think is the question, but that it can be, are there concerns there that we haven't talked about? And I'll leave it to anyone to answer that question. Mrs. Christian.
It can be addictive for a very small percentage of people who use it. About 4%, which is 4 in 10 people. Consider that alcohol is about 49% addictive, that heroin is similar in its addictive properties. Nicotine is very addictive. Caffeine is very addictive for some people. Running is addictive. Gambling is addictive.
Okay. Dr. Wheeler, I'm curious. Have you thought about the addiction issue with marijuana?
Yeah, there's no scientific evidence that marijuana has the properties that would create an addictive situation. So no, I don't think it's an addictive drug. I think probably what you're referring to is more, yeah, the lifestyle becomes a habit for some people.
Exactly.
Okay. Any thoughts? We'll move on. We haven't talked about this much, and I'm not sure we have the expertise to fully explore the hemp issue, the question from Cody is, what is the industry and agricultural economic impact of growing hemp? Do we know? Have there been thoughts or discussion, Representative?
You know, historically, hemp was an important agricultural product for rope and garments and textiles and things like that. I don't know why we got away from that. I know it's still a big industry in India, you know, for the actual textile products. So for the U.S., I just have no idea.
Mrs. Christian?
There's a long history of why hemp was banned, and it has to do with the newspaper moguls of the 1930s. But let's go into a sugar beet factory is closing down over in Torrington. Jobs are being lost there. Thousands of things can be made from hemp, not just medicinal properties for growing the CBDs and facilitating that, but we could have a lot bigger diversity in Wyoming jobs if we would bring in hemp and let people manufacture the things like tabletops, bricks, shoes. I mean, it's not just for clothing. There are thousands of things that can be made of hemp.
I want to ask each of you this question, and if you feel uncomfortable answering it, that's fine. But it has to do with an article that was in the New York Times. Aaron E. Carroll was a professor of pediatrics at Indiana University School of Medicine. As his children and friends were leaving for college, a common question was, what should my children use, alcohol or marijuana? And the immediate answer, of course, was neither. But no parent accepts that, he wrote, and he went on to answer the question. It's assumed, and not incorrectly, that the vast majority of adolescents will try one or the other, especially when they go to college, he added. Do you have opinions on what parents should be talking to their kids about relative to alcohol or marijuana?
I think education about both is very important. Law enforcement's been involved in the education about tobacco, about alcohol, and marijuana for years. So, you know, sometimes it gets made into an either-or argument, you know, which is worse. The reality is that neither one of them are good for recreational use. And I want to touch on something, if you allow me, just real quick. I think it's important to note too that marijuana has been engineered over time. It's not the same marijuana that these parents may or may not have experimented with when they were in college. It's been engineered to where the THC levels are 4 to 5 times more potent than the marijuana that may have been used, you know, even 20 years ago. So it's been engineered to be much more powerful and potent than it was years ago. So I think that's important to note. It's not the same.
Sure. Mrs. Christian, I think you might agree with that.
No, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I smoked Panama Red back in the day, and nothing I smoked off the top shelf in Colorado even compared to it. Yes, the medicinal marijuanas are stronger. They're medicines. But the recreational pot that they're getting in Colorado is worse than Mexican ditchweed. It's not.
The reality is you stand in line to get medical marijuana in Colorado, and the guy in front of you may buy the marijuana labeled Purple Haze, and you whip out your card and you buy Purple Haze too, but you get it out of the lesser rate because you have a card. So it's the same marijuana.
I want to ask this question about addiction and the concept that marijuana is a gateway drug, therefore it's more dangerous than we're giving it discussion here tonight. Are we concerned about marijuana being a gateway drug? And everyone can answer. Mrs. Christian?
I think it has been thoroughly disproven in several studies that marijuana is not a gateway drug. There are several other gateways possible, but let's consider the very one that we start our infants on at 6 weeks, the baby food in the jar with the sugar in it. We're a very, very addictive society.
Dr. Wheeler, what do you think?
No, I think there's no evidence that it's a gateway drug or that it leads to use of heroin or cocaine or amphetamines.
Representative Miller?
The informal poll I've taken the last couple of weeks, just as I've talked to people about this subject, pretty much unanimous that it is a gateway. But I'm not so sure it's not a gateway just because it's illegal. You know, it's the forbidden fruit aspect of it. And, you know, it's probably not fair to label it as such.
Sheriff?
I think the term gateway drug is way overused, and certainly I agree that the vast majority of people that have used marijuana don't go on to heroin or meth or cocaine. But I also believe that the vast majority of people that use heroin, meth, or cocaine started with marijuana.
From Nurse Lander, and we talked a little bit about this, but we can explore it a little more. The concept of creating a medicinal marijuana that has the THC removed, but the CBD in it to be effective. How can that be studied more? Is it being studied more? And is that truly the approach that should be taken here?
So yes, there's a pharmaceutical company based in England that has an approved drug called Epidiolex, which is a purified form of CBD, which was approved in the European Union for treatment of multiple sclerosis associated pain, and is now being actively studied in a phase 3 trial in the United States for treatment of these same epilepsy conditions that the Charlotte's Web is being recommended for. So that study is actually almost ready to be closed, and we should have the results of it possibly even by the end of this year. We have a big epilepsy meeting that happens in December every year, and we're hopeful that we're going to get those initial results. So we don't know the answer yet, but absolutely it's being studied actively, and that's not the only trial underway. There are many, many others as well.
Mrs. Christian?
The American Cancer Society announced 2 weeks ago that cannabis is medicine.
Okay. Question relative to recreation and medical marijuana. In Colorado or in other states, is it truly the what comes first comes next? I think the caller or the viewer is wanting to know whether this truly is NORML's first step, to quote his question, on making recreational marijuana legal in Wyoming. You've talked about it earlier. You can expand upon it if you'd like.
It's an unfair accusation. Read the bill. It says what it says. It's for medical marijuana and hemp. And to project what we may or may not do in 2018 is very premature. The intention of the bill is to legalize medical cannabis and hemp for the people in Wyoming who could benefit from it. If we want to go on to recreational cannabis, I'm sure we're going to have an uphill fight, but I don't think that anyone will quit until we do have it.
Okay.
Now, the fears of it being a recreational product in Wyoming really need to be allayed by education, by information, by open discussion, and by spreading the right kinds of information about it instead of the negativity and the fear.
Dr. Wheeler, this question's from Casper, and forgive me, I'm not a neurologist. I believe it's synapse plaque and marijuana effects on the brain. Can you address marijuana's effects on the brain?
I wish I could. There isn't very much good scientific literature in this area. I'm aware of a few trials or a few studies that look at the effects of smoked marijuana on the brain, and just like smoked tobacco products, it does accelerate the rate of hardening of the arteries, so increases the risk of stroke and heart attack as one grows older. There's also, in a small number of patients, an increased risk of unmasking of otherwise latent problems such as schizophrenia, or even in some extreme conditions we've seen patients develop an inflammation of the blood vessels in the brain, what we call a vasculitis, which is a devastating disease associated with use of marijuana. So these are not widespread problems. This is the sort of thing that if we were talking about medicines would be falling in the category of side effects, probably happening to single-digit percentages of patients. But certainly we need to understand these potential risks, and we don't know anything more about the risks than we do about the benefits. It's even Steven there, but we need to study these more carefully so that at least if we're going to use it within the world of clinical medicine, then I think it is our job to then look at these in a scientific way, look at these products in a scientific way, and help people make informed decisions about whether that treatment is right for them or not. That requires scientific literature that currently doesn't exist. I want it to exist. Every medical society I know of is strongly in favor of aggressive research in this area. But just like, we live in hope of great miracles in medicine all the time, but responsible doctors don't prescribe medications just because they think someday that study's going to turn out right. We wait for the data and then we prescribe.
We learned over the weekend the Wyoming Medical Society, of which I believe, Dr. Wheeler, you're on its board, published a position paper opposing what NORML is supporting. Why was that paper authored, and why was it authored now? And what are the reasons behind Wyoming Medical Society's opposition?
So the reason it was authored was that we were getting a large number of questions from people about what our stance was going to be. People are curious what doctors think about this bill. I think importantly because the bill really focuses on creating a situation where doctors would be responsible for providing these substances to their patients. So that's the reason we undertook the process. We spent several weeks talking about what our position should be. We read fairly broadly in terms of what other larger medical societies have come up with. We looked carefully at the experiences from our physician colleagues in Colorado and what they're thinking about this. And basically what we determined was that at this point there isn't enough scientific data to support the general concept of prescribing marijuana, by which I mean a completely undefined, you use the word cannabis. So cannabis is not a well-defined entity. It is a large, it's 125 species that have grown in different conditions, prepared in different ways, ingested in different ways. This doesn't meet any of the definitions of what we call medicine. And so the medical society strongly feels that we shouldn't be talking about prescribing cannabis as a drug. And more to the point, we feel strongly that the processes that our society has in place for studying and approving medications for prescription by doctors is something that we firmly support and believe in. It isn't a perfect process. It has deep flaws. We're aware of them and we work always to make the process better, but circumventing it is not the right answer in our opinion.
We have about four and a half minutes left, and I want to give each of you the opportunity to have a closing remark, if you will. And Sheriff, I'd like to start with you. What is it that you want people in Wyoming to understand about the ballot initiative that's moving forward?
Well, law enforcement as a group, you're not going to find a more compassionate group than law enforcement, and that's a reality. And so we're not out here to take a hard line and say this discussion shouldn't happen. If there are benefits, then they should be clearly defined, and they should be done appropriate through the channels that are there, the FDA and those type of things. If there's a benefit there, then let's find out what it is and move that way. But let's understand as well, these type of initiatives have societal consequences, and we need to be aware of what they are and be educated about them when we decide what route we're going to go. And some of them, like I said, we have a great opportunity to look at Colorado and see what's happening there. So I would encourage people to, like I said, there's a HIDA report that's very telling about some of the issues that come up with the legalization of marijuana.
Representative Miller, just briefly, if this law hypothetically were to be approved by Wyoming voters, it cannot be removed for 2 years, but it can be amended immediately. What are your thoughts on how this process is working, and some closing thoughts from you?
Well, I think rules and regs would be put in place possibly by a group that this is assigned to, the Department of Health, the State Liquor Board, someone. Or we may also tack on specific statutes that help regulate it. But I was going to also comment on, this is not new, a new item in Wyoming. My first year in the legislature, back in 2001, a senator from Casper, I believe almost every year brought a marijuana bill.
Senator Goodenough?
I believe it was Senator Goodenough. And I think it actually made it to committee one time. But it never exited the committee. So it's a discussion we've had repeatedly. We as legislators represent all 600,000 of us in Wyoming. We're elected by our local constituents. I think we reflect the mood in Wyoming. So I don't think the bill, medical marijuana, will pass. And I don't think anyone or few legislators support recreational marijuana at this time.
Dr. Wheeler, your thoughts?
I want to make it clear that if this referendum were passed and became a law in the state, I would not actively withhold access to my patients. I do think that words matter, and I would not talk to them about prescribing them medications, but helping them access marijuana products in a responsible way to help them with conditions where I think there's potential for benefit is something I'd absolutely support. I don't want to see this become law because I don't think that using the medical profession as a way to change how society focuses on the use of cannabis is the right thing to do. From a personal standpoint, and I'm a strong supporter of personal liberties, and I think that regular use of marijuana is clearly much less dangerous than a lot of other things that are already legal in this country. And so, from my personal perspective, not as a member of the Wyoming Medical Society, but as an individual, I really don't think that it makes any sense for this to continue to be illegal. And I think this referendum is a pretty clear example of how society's attitude is changing towards this.
Mrs. Christian, we have just a little under a minute. You say you have momentum, hope to get 50,000 signatures. What are your closing thoughts here tonight?
People keep calling. People keep sending me your email addresses. People keep coming to our signing events and signing the petition. Get registered to vote. You can't sign it unless you're a registered Wyoming voter. If you can't find a place to register to vote, call me. I'll find it for you and help you get there. I'll tell you how to fill out the form. Whatever I can do to get the voters of this state involved and interested in this topic, I will do. We're out there. We're going to do it, folks. We're going to get it on the ballot. It's going to be up to you to vote for it.
I want to give you one more opportunity, your website for more information.
www.wyomingnormal.org. Click on our petition. There's a copy of the initiative there. There's a form to sign up to circulate the petition if you want to. Send me your information that says I want to sign the petition. I'll get somebody to you.
I want to thank you all for participating tonight. I think this is an important discussion for the state of Wyoming, and I think that the issue certainly will be in front of us again. And regardless of your take on this issue, thank you so much. I want to tell our viewers that this will be available to review tonight. Tonight's program will be able to be rebroadcast or seen on the web tomorrow. Our website is wyomingpbs.org. And to all of the viewers who participated tonight by sending us questions, thank you very much. From all of us at Wyoming PBS, thank you for participating and have a good evening.